As the president and most governors round off their tenure in less than 18 months, all hands are now on deck to fulfill their electoral promises, which is why December 2021 was inundated with assent to various appropriation bills after its passage by the legislative arm of government. On this episode of Special Report, we'll highlight the estimates and aspirations of the different fiscal outlook for the year 2022.
The budget with the theme Economic Growth and Sustainability.
In October 2021, President Muhammadu Buhari presented the 2022 appropriation bill to a joint session of the National Assembly,
which the president said will be financed by new borrowing of 5.01 trillion naira. The president has just presented the budget.
The 2022 appropriation bill, tagged Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability, was made for an aggregate expenditure of 16.39 trillion naira. It described the 2022 budget as the first in the nation's history where ministries, departments and agencies were clearly advised on agenda-responsive budgeting.
The committee hereby recommends the consideration approval of the bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Fund of the Federation of the sum of 17 trillion.
At the final plenary session for the year 2021, both chambers of the National Assembly passed a 17.126 trillion naira 2022 budget after considering a report by its appropriation committees.
Bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 17 trillion 126 billion 873 million 917,692 naira only, of 5 trillion 467 billion 403 million 959,863 naira only is for contribution to the Development Fund for Capital Expenditure for the year ending on the first day of December 2022. Third reading taken, and the bill is hereby passed.
Honorable colleagues, we have now passed the 2022 appropriation bill. I want to thank members, commend them for their industry and hard work in the last 2 months. And I also want to use the opportunity to appeal to members. There is no perfect document. And I know some of the committees have not been able to do perhaps what they thought would be justice to some of the reports. It's nothing, it cannot be 100%, but a lot of work has gone into it, and I commend all of you, particularly Honorable Dan Dutse and Honorable Jobe. I know there are issues, but I appeal to you that we allow this, and it will continue to get better.
A week after the National Assembly transmitted the 2022 budget to the executive for assent, President Buhari formally received the document from the Senior Special Assistant on National Assembly Matters at the Council Chambers and the State House.
President of the Senate, I doubt if Mr. Speaker is represented. Mr. Speaker is here, so he's there. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, SGF, and the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning.
Accompanied by the President of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, and the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, the President signs a budget of 17.126 trillion naira for the year 2022.
Thank you, sir.
From the budget, 868 billion naira is earmarked for statutory allocation, 3.8 trillion naira for debt servicing, 6.9 trillion naira for recurrent expenditure, and 5.4 trillion naira for capital expenditure. The President is, however, displeased over certain insertions into the 2022 budget by the National Assembly.
As I mentioned during the presentation of the 2022 appropriation bill, the fiscal year 2022 is very crucial in our efforts to complete and put to use critical agenda projects, as well as improve the general living conditions of our people. It is in this regard that I must express my reservations about many of the changes that the National Assembly has made to the 2022 executive budget proposal. Some of the worrisome changes are as follows. A, increase in projected federal government independent revenue by 400 billion naira, the justification for which is yet to be provided to the executive. B, reduction in the provision for sinking fund to retire maturing bonds by 22 billion naira without any explanation. C, reduction of the provisions of the non-regular allowances of the Nigerian Police Force and the Nigerian Navy by 15 billion naira and 5 billion naira respectively. This is particularly worrisome because personnel cost provisions are based on agencies' nominal role and approved salaries and allowances. D, furthermore, an increase of 21.72 billion naira in the overhead budget of some MDAs, while the sum of 1.96 billion naira was cut from the provision for some MDAs without apparent justification. E, increase in the provision for capital spending, excluding capital share and statutory transfer, by a net amount of 575.63 billion naira from 4.89 trillion naira to 5.47 trillion naira. Nonetheless, provisions for some critical projects were reduced. These include 1. Reduction of 12.6 billion naira in the Ministry of Transport's budget for the ongoing rail modernization projects. 2. Reduction of 25.8 billion naira from power sector reform program under the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. And 3. Reduction of 14.5 billion naira from several projects of the Ministry of Agriculture and introducing over 1,500 new projects into the budget of this ministry and its agencies. F, inclusion of new provisions totaling 36.59 billion naira for National Assembly's projects in the service-wide vote, which negates the principle of separation of powers and financial autonomy of the legislative arm of government. G, the changes to the original executive proposal are in the form of new insertions, outright removals, reductions, and or increases in the amounts allocated to projects. I, provisions made for as many as 10,733 projects were reduced, while 6,576 new projects were introduced into the budget by the National Assembly. Reduction in the provisions for many strategic capital projects to introduce empowerment projects. The cuts in the provisions for several of these projects by the National Assembly may render the projects unimplementable or set back their completion, especially some of this administration's strategic capital projects. Most of the projects inserted relate to matters that are basically the responsibilities of state and local governments and do not appear to have been properly conceptualized, designed, and costed. Many more projects have been added to the budgets of some MDAs with no consideration for the institutional capacity to execute the additional projects and/or for the incremental recurrent expenditure that may be required.
Shortly after the signing of the budget, the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, gives his remarks.
As for the observations Mr. President has raised, this is a natural and logical tendency between the executive and the legislature. Sometimes our views on certain issues may not be necessarily the same kind of views that the executive would have and hold on any particular matter. So I don't think what the President did by raising some observations as something that we should worry about. I'm happy that the President signed the budget in the first place, and he said he's coming back to the National Assembly to seek for amendments or amendments, and this is natural logical legislative process. So I'm happy that we have done our own part in our own way. This is based on judgments. When we ask for more resources coming from the independent sources, especially from the government-owned enterprises of about 400 to 500 billion, is because we believe that these government-owned enterprises should contribute even much more. In fact, I hold the opinion that they should have contributed about $1 trillion at least, not 500 billion or so. So I believe that the National Assembly was right in its judgment, but there is nothing wrong in the executive arm of government coming back to the National Assembly to see how we are able to dialogue and go through the process and see where the misunderstanding is. But I don't think that is supposed to be a worrisome development for us.
Away from the nation's capital in Kaduna State, Governor Nasir El-Rufai has signed the state's 2022 budget into law with an assurance to the citizens of the state that the 278.58 billion naira budget will be strictly implemented to advance public welfare and develop human capital infrastructure.
Kaduna State government, with the active collaboration between the House of Assembly and the Executive, has consistently completed its budgetary process and started the fiscal year on the 1st of January since we were elected into office. This is a measure of the hard work of the Planning and Budget Commission and its staff, as well as the excellent collaborative and consultative relations between our legislature and our executive arms of government. I want to express my personal gratitude to Mr. Speaker and the entire membership of the Kaduna House of Assembly across party lines for the very cooperative and collaborative manner we've worked together in the last 6.5 years for the benefit of the people of Kaduna State. This is our second to the last budget, and as you can see from the numbers reeled out by the Speaker, this is a budget of the people. It's a budget of sustainable growth. And those that think that the state legislature just rubber stamps the budget should look at what we presented to the House and what they have passed. And those that say that the legislature doesn't know the budget, they can see that offhand, without looking at any papers or reading any prepared speech, the Speaker can recall the sectoral allocations of the major sectors.
The governor had in October presented a 233 billion naira draft 2022 budget to the State House of Assembly. However, the lawmakers, after collecting inputs from the people, increased the budget size to 278.58 billion naira, with 184.53 billion naira allocated to capital expenditure and 94.05 billion for recurrent spending. At the Kano State Executive Council chambers, Governor Abdullahi Ganduje, in company of other state officials, signed the 2022 budget over 221 billion naira into law, tagged the budget for consolidation and prosperity with a total value of 222.2 billion naira. He promised to ensure that the already established capital projects will be completed at the end of his tenure.
What is more interesting is the public hearing that you are able to hold. Public hearing is a very important component of appropriation bill making because it includes community participation, non-governmental organization, civil societies, and other stakeholders in order to provide their input into the making of the appropriation bill. As finally approved by the State Assembly, has a total value of 221 billion 235 million 185,147 naira only. This appropriation bill, as you know, that it is merely to ensure that we complete all the major projects for this government, since we are moving into a transition. That's the end of the administration.
Ebonyi State is one of the first states in the southeastern part of the country that passed its 2022 budget. The signing ceremony held at the Executive Council chambers of the Government House in Abakaliki and was attended by state officials from the different arms of government. Tagged Budget of Latter Rain, Governor Dave Umahi said the 2022 budget estimate represents an increase of 46.65% over the 2021 revised budget.
The 46.65% increase of the 2022 budget over the 2021 revised budget is due to the carryover of a large part of the expected receipts in this 2021 fiscal year to the next fiscal year. We expect about 4.315 billion from TED Fund, which is the balances of all the ongoing, TED Fund projects, for our tertiary institution. UBEB growth of over 1.2 billion from the BESDA, SEFTAs of 16.727 billion on the SEFTA programs.
Governor Hope Uzodinma has also signed into law the 2022 budget after being passed by the State House of Assembly. Speaking at the Government House in Owerri, Imo State capital, after appending his signature, the governor commended the speedy passage of the budget and assures that it will go a long way to achieve the objectives of his shared prosperity agenda.
So what is contained in the budget are those things that were agreed at the various town hall meetings that should be done for the fiscal year 2022. And that is why it was very easy for the House to pass expeditiously. So I think we are building consensus to make sure that we came on the same page, and that was what happened. And that explains why it took barely 1 week after his presentation for the budget to be passed by the House.
Top on the agenda for the governor of Ekiti State, Kayode Fayemi, is the completion of all projects before handing over power. After signing the 2022 budget of 100.7 billion naira into law, Governor Fayemi believes the structuring of the budget will set a good tone for the administration that will take over in the later part of the year.
The primary objective of the 2022 budget is to complete and consolidate on our numerous achievements and prepare a solid economic foundation for the incoming administration.
The governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, has promised to implement the 2022 budget with utmost sincerity, accountability, and effect massive infrastructural development for the state. Governor Bello gave the assurance after signing the 2022 appropriation bill in the Government House, Lokoja, the state capital. He adds that all the resources meant for the state in the 2022 budget will be judiciously utilized for the development of the state.
We will continue to improve on our security, because without security there can't be any meaningful economic development in the state. As we all know, Kogi State still remains the best in terms of security. My appreciation to all law enforcement agencies and the citizens of Kogi State for always responding promptly whenever there's any challenge. We will continue to guarantee zero corruption in Kogi State. Corruption will never lead us anywhere. We've tried our best to stem it to the barest minimum, if not at zero level, in Kogi State. I urge the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Economic Planning to continue to guide us through and ensure that we abide by all the provisions of the budget.
In Ogun State, Governor Dapo Abiodun has signed a 2022 budget of 350 billion naira into law. Assenting to the appropriation bill, Governor Dapo Abiodun commended the House leadership for the quick passage of the bill tagged Budget of Restoration. He assures residents of people-oriented projects while highlighting focal points of the budget, which has 56% listed for capital expenditure and 44% for recurrent expenditure.
I want to assure all our citizenry that the inputs that they expressed during the 3 different town hall meetings that we had are mostly reflected in this budget. Those that we were not able to capture in this budget have been noted, and they will be rolled over to the next following year's budget. This budget is a very important budget, and it's a very symbolic budget. It will be the last full year budget of this administration in the first 4 years. So it's a very, very important budget for us. We will continue to be a promise-keeping administration. We will ensure that we implement all that we promise. We will not promise to do everything.
Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike has assented to the 484 billion naira 2022 appropriation bill of the state 3 weeks after it was presented for legislative consideration and 1 week after it was passed by the State House of Assembly without variation. At a signing ceremony in Government House, Port Harcourt, Governor Wike promised to pool resources towards achieving at least 80% implementation of the 2022 budget, despite expected political distractions ahead of the 2023 general elections. And the pace-setter State Governor Seyi Makinde signed the 2022 budget of 294.7 billion naira and the Bill of Financial Autonomy for the House of Assembly into law, stating that the budget represents the wishes of the people of the state. Apparently, the speedy passage of the appropriation bills may be indicative of the cordial relationship between the legislative and executive arms of government. But what's important to the people is how these funds will be appropriated for the benefit of the people in the year 2022.
And that's it on this episode of Special Report. Thanks for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzango.